Well, welcome one and all to another episode of Becoming More. We are the Holy Hitchhikers, and I will be your host for the evening. My name is Mushure, and I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and an artist and a daydreamer, let's say. And so, Michael, could you introduce yourself?
I'm Michael Clifton, also a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also occasionally an artist, also occasionally a daydreamer, and I have nothing original to say.
Hopefully that won't be the case throughout this episode, but we'll see what happens. And so, could you introduce yourself, please?
I'm Sam Nordquist, and I am all of the above what the other two said, and I'm happy to be here.
And Sam has the amazing skill of making his face and body completely immobile while he speaks. It's not a trick of the camera, folks.
You're going to see him manifest that. You may see him manifest that superpower several times through this episode. We've had some technical difficulties trying to capture him, but we'll hopefully work through it.
But now you can tell that I've had small children and grandchildren, because as soon as you said we've had difficulties capturing him, I thought we just need a better Pokeball. Oh dear, I'm sorry. Okay.
So what we are doing in this series, Becoming More, is studying the talks given by the general authorities of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints over the course of the General Conference. The most recent conference was in April. This is 2021, and this is our fourth episode. So we are dealing with the fourth talk called "Teaching in the Savior's Way" by Jan E. Newman, Elder Newman of the.
Is it Jan or Jan?
Jan. Sorry, you're correct. Jan Newman, the Second Council on the Sunday School General Presidency of the Church worldwide, and. So what we are doing, this is a new podcast for us, obviously, being the fourth episode, and we may change things up as we go along. Today we're experimenting a little bit. The last episode we did was we'll see. We're very talkative, so what I'm about to say might not be true. But this may, I think the last episode was probably longer than this episode would be. In fact, the entire discussion, I sort of, as I lead the discussion, it's going to be essentially revolve around two simple questions. However, how simply or not so simply the questions are responded to, and hopefully there'll be meat. Don't take it by any means, gentlemen, that I'm saying that you should, by simple, you should be very brief. Say what comes to mind, say what the Spirit has to say to you, but this conversation is essentially going to revolve around two questions.
There are ancient insights in regard to wisdom that would suggest that the simpler the person is, the more likely they are to say too much.
In that case, I think we may be very simple.
I think so.
So that said, and we can, for those of you on YouTube, we can put a link to the talk to which we are referring in the description.
Smart.
And we'll do that on Facebook as well, so that you can read the talk for yourself and see exactly the context of what we're talking about. But obviously, the title again of the talk to which we're referring is "Teaching in the Savior's Way." And so, my first question to you, brethren, is what stood out to you most as you reviewed this talk? Start that. Either one of you, whoever wants to jump in first.
Well, I think there were lots of things stood out to me. So I'm going to list all 25 of them. No. Well, let me pick one. It's the concept of conversion. It's something, as you know, I work with a number of interfaith groups, and conversion is a bad word in a lot of them, especially in relation to Christianity, because of forced conversions, because of the connection between conversion and colonialism and occupation and the rampant abuses of people. Residential schools have that aspect of conversion in them, forced conversion. in the worst possible way for the most part. So it's a bad word, but amongst us, it has a different meaning. Not only do we have a mostly different history, we've made some of the same mistakes as other groups have had, and it's not just Christians, right? You know, Muslims have a really bad history of forced conversion as well at and I was going to say gunpoint, at the blade side, or however you say that. But it's very evident in Brother Newman's talk. Elder Newman, I guess, is he brother? He calls himself brother at one point, but Elder Newman. In Elder Newman's talk, whatever. That and of course it's a truth we understand. We take his tract. It's only worth saying for the sake of people who might be listening and wanting to understand it, that conversion to us is not about joining the church. It's used synonymously because we talk about missionaries going out and converting people, and when you're converted, you get baptized, blah, blah, blah. But we use conversion more in the sense that Jesus did when he spoke to the Apostle Peter, and he said, when you are converted, strengthen your brethren, right? Conversion is not about changing church, it's about changing character. And on the deepest possible sense, where you become that new creature in Christ. So as we transform spiritually, we are converting. So you can join the church and not be converted. You can not join the church and be in the process of conversion, right? Obviously, as faithful Latter-day Saints, we believe that ultimately along the line, being baptized and following Jesus Christ is part of the conversion process for all of us. But you know, that might or might not happen in this iteration of the church, right? This isn't the only true church that's ever existed. The one, you know, in Jesus's time was also the true church, and it didn't have exactly the same name. But you know, so it's about how we allow God and the Spirit to transform us through our faith and devotion. That's what conversion is about. It's not about pushing people into church membership, giving them a number, and making sure they're sitting in the right seat and paying their money.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Before I get to, are you bursting to get out to comments, Sam, or can I dwell on what Michael said?
Yeah, you go for it. Yeah.
Well, and while you dwell on it, I'm noticing I'm getting darker. I'm going to go turn on a light or two. I'm listening. I can hear you.
Well, you'll need to hear me because my question is back to you. So don't mind the fact that you can't see Michael right now. Hopefully we can still hear him. My question to you, Michael, is so you mentioned the term that stood out to me and what you're saying that we're trying to not do. You talked about colonialism and you talked about forced conversion. Right now, as I said, this is 2021. When we're recording this episode, and there is some things happening in the world right now that you can see some of the philosophies of men that are circulating, and there are those who think that, well, if we can make everyone who doesn't think like us do what we want them to do, well, then we will have peace in society and everything will be great and the world will be a wonderful place. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with forced conversion? I mean, so the colonists essentially did this. What was wrong with what they were doing? They thought they were serving God. At least I think they thought. They pretend at least to have thought that. Well, what's wrong with that?
I'm not going to pretend to expertise. I think there are people who understand psychology better and history better who could give you a better answer. But two simple answers. One, it's fake. You force someone into conversion, they aren't really converted. And there will always be something inside them rebelling against that. Whether it's a resentment or a guilt or a pain or a shame of some kind, there will always be something. The other part of it, I guess, is related to that, but it's for us to be fully human, to realize who and what we are and what we're destined to be, each of us, you know, regardless of the theological implications of that statement, but just to be fully human in any sensible sense of the word, we must have some degree of power over who we are, over our self-expression or our expression of ourselves. We have to have a sense of power. And I think nothing has created more harm in individual lives than robbing someone of his or her power. And really, most forms of abuse, and again, using that term in its broadest sense as well as its narrowest, are all about robbing people of their power, of their dignity, of their self-direction. And that's to me crushing the essence of the person. I mean, it doesn't literally crush it. There's always that eternal soul inside that will be on some level fighting against it, but sometimes buried under the weight of that abuse. So to me, that's one of the most heinous things we can do, is to take away a person's agency, to use a Latter-day Saint kind of expression, but that sense of empowerment and enfranchisement, or whatever code word is useful for the context.
Yeah, I wonder how, you know, I'm not in the minds of those who are making those kinds of decisions in history, but you know, on one end of the spectrum, you know, it could be, you know, wicked leaders just using religion as a tool for control, all the way on to the other end of the spectrum, where, you know, you have earnest intentions, and you're just overzealous with those intentions, and your desire is to save every single soul. And if you have that very dogmatic belief that the only way to do that is to make sure that everybody is baptized and everybody confesses the Lord, whether they want it or not, that you're going to save them, and you're actually doing them a favor, whether they like it or not. You know, that it may have been with those, you know, with those kinds of intentions, and I don't know. We see that in modern times as well. Like we see, you know, we've known about many instances where, you know, missionaries will baptize people, and they're not ready, or they're not really converted, and yet, you know, they're just overzealous. They're trying to get their, you know, numbers up, and you know, you've heard of the baseball baptisms and whatnot. You know, they'll get people to come, get youth to come out and have a great time, play a game, and then, oh, after we're done, we're going to cool off in the baptismal font, right? And so it's
baseball
you know,
baptisms. That was a big thing in Japan.
how, you know, how different is that from from in terms of where the intentions are, right? Is the intention for that person's soul to be truly converted to the Lord, or is the intention to get your numbers up so that you look good, so that you get a promotion, or so that you you know, maybe you honestly want to please the Lord, but that's just not how to do it, right? Yeah. Just a really gross misunderstanding of how the Lord works, how free agency works. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's very true. And sorry, Mushure, just to interrupt one other comment. I think the topic, maybe we'll keep coming back to it in every episode, is love, right? It's we do things, all of the things that Sam was describing are activities done out of pride, right? And not out of love, love for the individual. And I was struck. I had a number of very personal thoughts. I'm
sorry, just to interject real quickly.
Yeah.
I think to clarify that idea before you continue, when you say pride, someone might ask, well, how's it pride if I'm trying to teach them the gospel of Jesus Christ? Well, the pride is in that you understand that what you're teaching is the gospel of Jesus Christ, at least what you think is the gospel of Jesus Christ, because if it was truly the gospel of Jesus Christ, you wouldn't be trying to force it onto somebody else. That's not how the gospel of Jesus Christ works.
You might say the right words, but you're right. And in fact, you not exemplified yourself personally, but in the character that you were adopting there, when you said, the guy says, you know, I'm teaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. Well, that's the problem. Who's teaching the gospel? Not I.
Right.
If it isn't the Spirit, it's not being taught. And so, you know, as soon as we say, I'm baptizing, I'm going to get them to come back to church. I mean, no, you're not. You're not. Even if you get them to come back to church, you haven't got them to come back to church. Either the Spirit has done it despite you, or you have somehow manipulated the situation and it's not going to survive. So, I mean, whenever our pride is involved, it's going to fail. So I was saying, you know, I had a number of very personal insights as I was listening to this talk, and the other one we wanted to talk about. And a lot of them about raising our children. So in Elder Newman's talk, he says we can't give our children a testimony any more than we can make a seed grow. And I think that phrase exemplifies what we're talking about here. But he says, but we can provide a nourishing environment with good soil, free of thorns, and blah, blah, blah. We can strive to create the ideal conditions so that our children and others we love can find place for the seed. It's a beautiful expression. In fact, this talk is quite moving when he stretches so far out of the mandate of telling us how good coming to Christ is. And, yeah, I use the manual, but here I'm going to teach you deeper things. But, I was thinking that of my kids, and Sam, I think maybe you can relate to this. I have two children, one of whom is currently active in the church. She attends meetings and is participating the best she can and at her level of understanding, and it's great. And she has a testimony, a growing testimony, and she expresses it. The other doesn't. He's what's the word in English? Hantai in Japanese. Anyway, he's sort of oppositional to the church, opposed to it. And I mean, he's not aggressively harsh with us, but he's just got a different direction in life, and he's rejected the gospel. They both grew in the same soil, right? They both grew in the same environment that I know was not a perfect one, and I don't take any credit for one of them being active. but it makes me realize that, or it made me reflect on the idea that sometimes as parents or as teachers, we think that creating a nourishing environment is something we conceive in our from our range of experience and understanding. But what I think is the best soil is only going to be the best soil for me. And if I want to be a good parent and a good teacher of the gospel, I have to know what the soil is, what the nutritional requirements are for the person that I'm trying to teach. And it was clearly different for both of my children. And I didn't give them different soil to flourish in. So, there wasn't enough. People make their own choices and things, but clearly I can say I didn't understand well enough how to nourish each of my children. And very often as teachers and parents, we have that shortcoming where we aren't capable ourselves of providing nourishment to everyone, unless, again, we do it through the Spirit who knows every individual that we're trying to teach.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. That's really beautiful. As you gave that description, I thought how interesting wheat and rice and corn are different from one another. They require the requirements are different. The concept is the same, but they have particular requirements, particular needs for each one. And in order to successfully grow one, you need to do what's appropriate for that one, as opposed to the other. And you, as a farmer, could grow all three crops, but you have to treat each of the crops differently.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Sam, you were going to say something.
Yeah. I don't know. There's so many things I want to say. I'm not sure how. Some of it kind of relates, going back to the original question that you were asking. Which point stood out the most, and for me, it was the idea that each of us have the responsibility to learn on our own, right? This is, and I think it's a beautiful example, like providing the soil, the fertilizer, the water, the sunlight, is providing with all of the opportunities. But really, it's up to me to plant the seed, right? It's up to me to grow. And so I think, and that's, and the thing is, I don't know, it's a tricky thing too, because I'm a parent as well, and I have children that are probably in the same belief spectrum. I have children that are very committed to Jesus Christ, and I have other children that are completely atheist or agnostic about it. And it's so interesting to see, because like you said, that all four of my kids grew up in the same environment, the same soil, the same all the same things. And I kind of echo what you're saying. I know for a fact that I could have been a much better farmer, really. Okay, as a parent, and yet I see them as they grow up, and I'm not sure if they ever will return back to the church. I don't know if I think of that, that is one measuring stick, which I don't know if it's very useful to use that as a measuring stick as to whether you are a successful parent or not, whether they are active in the church or not. And I think God has a much grander plan. I think there's, he has so many of his children and he loves every single one of them. And about, less than half of 1% of his children are actually members of his church, and most of them are inactive in that church. So, I don't think, I think there's much more to it than just that one measuring stick that we so often tend to use. And are they learning something? Are they contributing to society? Are they learning to love? It's, what they believe doesn't matter as much to me as what they become. And they could be an atheist, and that's perfectly fine. They may be a much better example of love than me, for sure. I've seen that. I've been put to shame by people that don't believe in God at all whatsoever, but they know how to love and they know how to treat people. And I have a lot to learn from them. And so I don't think, we're, of course, in our podcast here, we're talking about things related to the church. We're covering all the general conference talks, and of course, they're always very faith promoting. But the reality is that many people just don't choose to go in that direction in life. And what are we to do about that? I think we're called simply to just love, like you said earlier, Michael. That's what it comes down to. You just have to love every one of them, no matter what.
I think, sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think that segues to the other talk that we want to get to today in our podcast recording, which is great.
Yeah.
I was thinking, and I can't remember now what I was listening to in the last day or two, but it's a principle of the gospel, but I think I was actually hearing someone outside of the church talking about it, that it's not about what we do in the sense of being members of the church or that sort of thing. That wasn't the expression used, but what matters is the trajectory that we're on.
Absolutely.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're all at different starting places, and we all have different motivations. And your comments actually brought me to mind of one of the instructors at the Mission Training Center decades and decades ago when I went on my mission, who talked about the different reasons people serve missions. To please their parents, to, save face, or because they love the Lord, or have a testimony, or whatever it might be. And he said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your starting motivation is. You're on the path. And eventually, all those motivations are going to converge in the same place. And we see that in the lives of children. Some are great at one thing, great at another, but by the time they're young adults, they can all do pretty much everything that school required or that they need to survive in their daily life, short of disabilities or other interfering shortcomings, or interfering factors. But anyway, it's that it's the trajectory that matters most. So yeah, the atheist may be on the trajectory of love and faith and spirituality much more than the quote unquote faithful religionist.
I think, and what you hear you saying is that no matter where your starting point is, at some point, every single one of those people will have to experience the conversion for themselves, no matter what. And one of the most comforting things that the bishop has told to me, when I talked to him about my children, and he said, you know what, you're, as the shepherd in your home, maybe you've lost your sheep, but those sheep are not lost to the Lord. He knows them by name. He knows where they are, and And so maybe, maybe the Lord will use another shepherd in another place to look after my sheep, but to not worry as much as I was worrying about it. So it was very comforting to hear that.
Yeah, that's probably, once Sam and I had a conversation about some counsel I'd received that I didn't appreciate at the time. That's probably the point that counselor was trying to make. Do you remember that conversation?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. But, I don't think he said it in the right way, and you've said it in a way that makes perfect sense.
Which actually segues to the second question that I had for you.
Good idea. There's only 3 minutes left in this.
Well, if you could, well,
we'll take our time.
Yeah. So I'll just drop this really quickly. For me, in response to the first question, what stood out to me is as you mentioned it, Michael, love. That it's all about love. And so, anyway, in terms of the second question,
So anyway,
I was going to pose was what if you can think of an example, if you could share an example. I don't know if you want to share that particular example to which you referred, of the best instruction that you have received. If you can think of an example, yes, of the best, you think of best teaching that you've ever received, but not necessarily the doctrine or whatever, but the best teaching. I don't know if I'm conveying that.
I think I might understand what you're saying. The best. Well, okay, I'll answer that, and you tell me if it answers what you were asking. Okay. My brother, my older brother Jamie, he's now passed on, but years ago he was the Sunday school president in his ward, and it was so interesting because at that same time I was the gospel doctrine teacher in my ward, and so many times we would call each other and kind of compare notes and have really interesting and very deep gospel conversations. And he was telling me one time he received a visit, like his area received a visit from a general authority. That general authority was Elder Nelson at the time. Okay, and he actually got to sit right beside him, which is kind of cool. But you know how when a general authority comes and visits, they have usually in the adult session they speak, and then they tend to at the end they have like a Q&A period where you can ask anything you want. You have a question, go ahead and ask, right? And so one of the questions was for Elder Nelson was, how do we make it so that, I mean, we have these teachers in these classes, they're great teachers, but we still have so many people out in the hallways that don't attend their class. How do we get people to attend their class? We don't want to force people because that doesn't feel right, but still we want them to attend their classes. How on earth do we kind of get them to do that? And his answer was actually simple. It was brilliantly simple. He said, you just get your teachers to teach classes that are so interesting and so nourishing that the students will not want to miss it, and they'll be there. And such a simple answer, right? If you push people into a class that they don't want to be in, it's not going to work. But if you teach in such a way that is so good that people will scramble to get to classes, and I've been in classes like that where that the teacher was very engaging, or just the class discussion was so engaging. I'm like, I don't want to be late. I want to be there for this, And yes, we had situations where, you would not have people out in the hallway because they didn't want to dare miss a class. So anyway, did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you. That's the word I was struggling with. I was talking about teaching, and I think was just the best instruction. The best example of instruction, and what you're giving. Yes, exactly that. Michael, what you were the anecdote that you were relating sort of seemed like, I don't know whether it was a case of the individual was not their method of instruction was ineffectual, or if it was that you might not have been receptive at that point in time, but it seemed to be like almost at the opposite end of the spectrum. Can you think of one where the teaching the instruction was so effective that you it was something that
had to give in.
yes.
Yeah. No, yeah, I did. I had actually 3 examples, because I have to be honest, I'm one of those people who doesn't get bored at church. I certainly recognize when someone's not an effective teacher or speaker, but I don't care. You know, it's fun to learn the gospel. It's fun to be part of a class or part of a meeting. And so, you know, if they're not a very good teacher, unless they're offensively bad, then I'm going to be okay in that class. But when I think of some of the best instruction I've received, they're not in classes. One is not even a moment in time. There was a former bishop when I was a young married adult, who was so effective in everything he taught. And it was his character, his example was and he was not a perfect man, but he was humble, and he strove to follow the Lord, and he was compassionate and loving. And that has stuck with me. His example sticks with me. I could probably not tell you a single actual thing that he said, but that example stays with me. The other is one phrase that another bishop used, who I respected immensely. He was actually a counselor to that other bishop for a while. And he simply used the phrase, "Oh, that's the natural man speaking." And you know, when he said that, it just hit home right away. Oh yeah, that's where I'm talking from right now, or that's where that idea is coming from. And it's been a life lesson. It's something that I reflect on at times. Is that the natural man speaking? And the other one was in the context of a class, and not by a person who I'd say is necessarily the most exceptional example of everything in the gospel, but you know, part of the family, part of the church family. But he was a brilliant teacher, a brilliant speaker, and a brilliant teacher, and he did a teacher development course where he taught us that there is no principle of the gospel that cannot be taught in under 5 minutes. And it goes back to that, you know, again, the simple person talks too much. When we indulge our pride, we make things more complex than they need to be. We think we need to say so. I have this habit, as you can tell. But he taught us to just get to the point. And that combined with lessons I'd learned on my mission, where we were told, get out there on the street. It was in Japan, so you know, billions of people. Get on the street, meet people, and give them a spiritual experience, or the opportunity for one, invite them to a spiritual experience within 30 to 60 seconds. And darn it, it works. You can do it. We don't have to belabor points. We don't have to have 15-minute talks at the pulpit. Spiritual experience takes moments. Teaching a principle takes minutes. And those are just lessons that have stayed with me, even though obviously the last ones didn't have much influence.
Thank you. Yeah, so what I'm getting out of this, and you can and we're encouraged to educate ourselves. You know, you can expand your academic understanding of things, and you know, your understanding of a history, a historical context of, you know, whatever, the gospel and how it's unfolding on the world and what have you. But and it's great to have that those tools in your toolbox, that ammunition in your chamber. But what is key here is that you're not it's not the person, the individual, the conversion of the individual, the reception of them, their growth, their reception to understanding the gospel and getting to know Heavenly Father is not reliant upon you. You're merely a conduit. And those things, all that education and experience that you have, can help facilitate that experience. But I love that example you talked about in the third anecdote you mentioned there, Michael, about, you know, the 30-second spiritual experience. How on earth can I, as a mortal man, provide that experience for somebody? Well, you know, the answer is that I can't, whether it's 30 seconds or 30 years, but the Spirit can. And if I am truly allowing myself to be that conduit, which comes from love, love for Heavenly Father and love for that individual, the student, then that it becomes possible. And so what the Sam mentioned, this making your lesson interesting or what have you. I can't remember exactly how you put it, but it's not to be understood to be that you need to wow people with this fantastic presentation. That can be great, but in order for it to be lasting, it again has to provide that 30-second spiritual experience that Michael talked about, which is why I think that you mentioned that perhaps imperfect teacher that you mentioned was nevertheless effective in teaching a lesson.
You know, when you teach a class, or when there's any kind of teaching, you don't want, I mean, there's two kinds of lessons, basically. Two kinds of good lessons. There's the kind of lesson where everybody at the end of the lesson says, wow, wasn't that an amazing teacher? And then there's the kind of lesson where everybody says, wow, don't we have an amazing God? Right? So what kind of lesson do you want to be teaching? Right?
Yeah.
You know, and you have to, as a teacher, I mean, it's a very, I think it's a very fun calling. It can be very nerve-wracking, but you always have to keep that in check. Are you teaching to entertain people? Are you teaching to boost your own ego because you're such a great speaker and you're such a funny, humorous person, make people laugh? Or are you trying to facilitate conversion that's happening right in your classroom? What I always tried to do as a teacher, and it was sometimes it's a fine line. What you know, it's easy to get carried away, but I always went in hopefully with this mindset that you look at when you show up and you have a class that shows up and there was some reading that should have taken place, and you know that the majority of the people did not do the reading, you know that they're not, you know, you kind of have to, you know, it's okay to read the scriptures, even though some people may have may have done the reading during the week. And in a way, you sort of have to spoon feed people a little bit by actually reading the scriptures. There's nothing wrong with reading scriptures, right, in class?
Ideal.
But what the goal though is not to actually feed people everything that they're supposed to be eating. It's really just to let people realize how hungry they really are. Because if you can let if it tastes good and they realize this is good stuff, I need more of this stuff, you know, then they go home and they have a feast, and that's the goal. To me, that's the goal as a teacher, is to get people fired up enough to realize that they're actually hungry and that they need more than just once a week spoon feeding. They need to feast every day themselves on their own in private, and have that relationship with the Lord. And I think that's where the conversion takes place. It's in private. It's not in the classroom necessarily. So.
Well, that's exactly how you're making me feel right now, Sam. That was beautiful.
Yes, absolutely. That the realization that they're hungry, and that there is an absolute buffet available to them at, you know, arm's length, that is, you know, of the highest caliber cuisine, if they would just access it.
I'm glad you specified highest caliber cuisine. I was picturing some buffets I've been at and thinking, no, thank you.
Well, we may have, sorry, go ahead. Last thought, Sam, go ahead.
No, I'm good. If you want to take us out, okay. I'm good with that.
Okay. So on that note, thank you very much, gentlemen, for your comments. I think we may have gone over time a little bit, but we're prone to do so. Thank you all for listening in, and if you would like to, if you have insights that you want to share with us on YouTube or on Facebook, you can leave your comments on associated with this video. And on YouTube, you can do that in the comments below. By all means, if you found any value in this discussion, then by all means hit the like button, and you can subscribe so you can be notified of upcoming our conversations that we will release when they come out. And just click the bell as well, and then you can receive those notifications. Michael, could you let people know how they can get in touch with us on Facebook?
Go on Facebook, get in touch with us. I'm so glad that you give me the opportunity to give the technical information. With our page is called Becoming More, but you might know that if you're watching this video. You can like us there. You can search for our names and you might find us. we're somewhat searchable. Well, except Mushure, he's under Rain Man.
No, stop that. Don't tell him that.
Okay, sorry. edit, scratch.
I have a professional page under Mushure Raynor, so you can find me that way.
Okay, all right.
On Facebook, that is. Also on, I believe Michael, you're no longer on Twitter. Is that correct?
I'm personally not on Twitter, but we are on Twitter.
That's right.
We have now I have discovered there are other podcasts that use the name Holy Hitchhikers, which was a surprise, but it's out there. It's a couple of Hasidic Jews hitchhiking is what it looked like, which is cool. I'm now tempted to watch that. There's also another podcast called Becoming More. There's no podcast that combines the two, so I think we might be safe. But we are definitely different from all the others, so no one would ever confuse them. But yeah, people might find those other things while they're looking for us because they're vastly more famous.
It's at Holy Hitchhikers on Twitter, and yes,
so, I set that up, but I didn't remember. Or
I don't know. We are not yet on iTunes, but Sam, could you
soon to be? Yeah, soon to be on iTunes, and that's coming shortly.
Okay. So, with that said, God be with you all. Take care, and we'll see you next time on. Oh, one more thing I got to mention. More
this
is
why
less.
Our shows never end.
Yes, more. So we now have shorter episodes of the taken from the major discussion that we have, clips that you can share called "More is Less."
Less
is more.
That's right. Less is more or less. More or less got it right, didn't I?
Maybe that's what we should call our channel, More or Less, because they have the choice.
We'll get there. We promise people. Take care.